In a kingdom where strength determined destiny, Alpha King Alaric surveyed his domain from atop his obsidian throne. His bloodline had ruled for 10 generations, each king more powerful than the last. Yet now, as whispers of rebellion stirred beyond his borders, his greatest concern was the emptiness of his nursery. Royal advisors had presented him with countless noble Omega women, all failing to meet his exacting standards. Then during the spring harvest festival he saw her, a village girl, with eyes that reflected neither fear nor reverence. Something ancient stirred within him. That evening he summoned her to the palace. Guards dragged her trembling form before his imposing figure. "I need strong sons," he declared, voice echoing through the silent hall, "and you'll provide them." The village of Willowbrook nestled in the valley like a child cradled in its mother's arms. Morning dew glistened on thatched roofs as Ilara collected herbs from her garden, fingers working with practiced precision. At 22, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her Omega status in a world where such things determined one's place. "Ilara, the feverfew is running low," called her mother from inside their modest cottage. Maeve was the village healer, a position that afforded their family respect despite their humble standing. "I'll gather more this afternoon," Ilara replied, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. Her fingers brushed against the wooden pendant that hung around her neck, her grandmother's parting gift before passing into the next realm. The pendant was warm against her skin, as it often was when her emotions stirred. Strange things had always happened around Ilara when her feelings ran high. At 7, she'd made flowers bloom out of season when crying over a dead bird. At 12, she'd calmed a storm that threatened the harvest by humming a lullaby her grandmother taught her. The villagers called her odd, peculiar, weak for an Omega with her thin frame and quiet demeanor, yet somehow unsettling. "Did you hear?" Martha, the baker's wife, leaned over their shared fence. "The king will attend the spring festival. First time in a decade." Ilara nodded politely, though royal matters rarely concerned her. The Alpha King was a distant figure whose decrees occasionally reached their village through traveling officials. Taxes increased, borders shifted, but life in Willowbrook remained largely unchanged. "You should wear your blue dress," Martha continued. "Show those visiting nobles that our village has pretty Omegas too." "I'm needed at the healing tent," Ilara replied, knowing her place was not among those seeking to catch a royal eye. Thomas, her childhood friend and the blacksmith's son, appeared at the garden gate. His beta status placed him comfortably in the middle hierarchy. Neither commanding like alphas nor submissive like Omegas were expected to be. "Your mother sent me to carry her supplies to the festival grounds," he said, then lowered his voice. "The Royal Guard arrived this morning. They're searching every building, checking every face against some list." Ilara's pendant warmed further. "What are they looking for?" "Not what who." Thomas glanced around before continuing. "There's talk of a prophecy. Something about an Omega with the power to change the kingdom." Ilara scoffed gently. "Omegas with power? That sounds like a tavern tale." The festival day arrived with unusual warmth for early spring. Ilara helped her mother set up the healing tent, grinding willow bark for pain tinctures while keeping a careful distance from the royal pavilion erected at the center of the grounds. The king had not yet arrived, but his presence was felt in the increased guards and nervous energy of the villagers. "Ilara." Thomas appeared at her side as afternoon shadows lengthened. "Come see the dancers. You've been working all day," she relented, following him through the crowd. The wooden pendant seemed to pulse against her skin as they passed the royal pavilion. And then she saw him, the Alpha King, taller than those around him, with shoulders that carried the weight of the realm. But it was his eyes that caught her, sharp, assessing, cutting through pretense and pleasantry. Those eyes found hers in the crowd, and for a moment the festival sounds dimmed. Ilara felt something stir within her, ancient and unfamiliar. The pendant burned hot against her skin. She turned away, pushing through the crowd, heart racing without reason. "What's wrong?" Thomas caught up to her at the edge of the festival grounds. "Nothing. Just needed air." but the lie felt hollow on her lips. That night, as Ilara prepared for sleep, royal guards pounded on their cottage door. Her mother's face paled as the captain announced, "By order of King Alaric, the Omega Ilara of Willowbrook is summoned to the palace immediately." Thomas, who'd been delivering firewood, stepped forward. For what purpose? The guard's expression remained impassive. The king does not explain his purposes to village betas. As Ilara was led away, Thomas called after her, "Remember who you are, Ilara. The palace changes people." The wooden pendant burned against her skin, as if awakening to a purpose long dormant. In her last glimpse of home, she saw her mother clutching a small leather-bound book to her chest, the same book she'd always kept hidden beneath the floorboards, the one Ilara had been forbidden to touch. The royal carriage rattled over cobblestone roads as dawn broke across the kingdom. Ilara sat stiffly on velvet cushions, her simple dress a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Outside the window, peasants paused in their morning labors to watch the procession. Curiosity and pity mingling in their gazes, the palace rose before them, a behemoth of white stone and soaring towers that seemed to pierce the very heavens. Guards flanked the iron gates, their expressions impassive as the carriage passed through. "We have arrived." "Omega," announced the captain, the royal decree bearing the king's seal clutched in his gloved hand. The parchment had been presented to her mother, who read it with trembling hands before it was rolled and returned to the guard. Ilara was escorted through corridors of polished marble, tapestries depicting alpha victories lining the walls. Servants scurried past, casting furtive glances her way. The pendant at her throat remained warm, a small comfort in this foreign world. "This will be your chamber," said a stern-faced woman waiting at an ornate door. "I am Lady Beatrice, assigned to prepare you for court life." The room beyond was larger than her entire cottage, with a canopied bed and windows overlooking manicured gardens. Ilara stood motionless in the center, feeling as out of place as a wildflower in a greenhouse. "The king has instructed that you be properly outfitted," Lady Beatrice continued, opening a wardrobe filled with gowns of silk and velvet. "Your rustic attire is unsuitable for palace life. When will I speak with His Majesty?" Ilara asked, finding her voice. "When he summons you, girl. Until then, you will learn proper etiquette and conduct befitting your new position." Lady Beatrice's lips pinched disapprovingly, though why he chose a common village Omega is beyond comprehension. Left alone, Ilara approached the window, watching nobles stroll through the gardens below. A group of richly dressed men huddled in conversation, occasionally glancing toward her window. One raised a jeweled hand, pointing directly at her, his expression cold with disdain. Days passed in a blur of lessons. How to walk, speak, eat and dress according to court standards. Lady Beatrice was a relentless instructor, criticizing every misstep. Nights brought strange dreams of ancient forests and women with glowing eyes, who called to her in a language she somehow understood but could not remember upon waking. On the fourth morning, Ilara slipped away from Lady Beatrice's watchful eye, wandering until she discovered the palace library. Towering shelves filled with more books than she had ever seen made her breath catch. Her fingers trailed along leather-bound spines until one seemed to call to her, its cover warm like her pendant. "The royal council does not approve of his choice," came a hushed voice from behind a nearby shelf. Ilara froze, a commoner bearing royal airs. "Unprecedented," replied another. "Prince Dorian is furious. Says she'll dilute the bloodline. The king grows more unpredictable since the Northern Rebellion. This Omega is merely another impulsive decision. Still, there's something unusual about her." The servants say Ilara retreated silently, heart-pounding. The political currents of the palace ran deeper and darker than she'd imagined. That evening, a servant arrived with a message. "The king requests your presence in the East Observatory at sunset." Lady Beatrice fussed over Ilara's appearance, muttering about inadequate preparation time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Ilara was led to a tower where the king awaited. From a shadowed alcove, She observed him first, his broad back to her as he gazed through a brass telescope at the emerging stars. His presence filled the room, an unmistakable aura of alpha power that made the air itself seem heavier. "Your Majesty," announced the guard. "The Omega from Willowbrook." King Alaric turned, his gaze intense as a physical force. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint scar along his jawline. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with none of the softness that came with pampered royal living. "Leave us," he commanded, his voice deep and resonant. As the guards withdrew, Ilara stood alone before the Alpha King. The pendant and the observatory air hung heavy with tension as King Alaric circled Ilara, his assessing gaze missing nothing. Moonlight streamed through the domed glass ceiling, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. "Do you know why you're here?" His voice filled the space between them, deep and commanding. Ilara met his gaze with unexpected steadiness. "You made your intentions quite clear in the village, Your Majesty." A slight raise of his eyebrow betrayed his surprise at her directness. Most Omegas, especially common ones, cowered in his presence. This one did not, despite the faint tremor in her hands. "Indeed," he replied, removing his signet ring and placing it on a nearby table. The royal crest glinted in the moonlight, a wolf with a crown between its teeth. "And what do you think of those intentions?" "I don't believe my thoughts on the matter were a consideration." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "You speak like an educated woman. My mother taught me to read. Knowledge isn't exclusive to nobility." Alaric leaned against the observatory table, arms crossed. "Tell me about your village." The question caught her off guard. She'd expected demands, perhaps even threats, not curiosity about her home. Cautiously, Ilara spoke of Willowbrook, its seasons and people, the herbs she gathered, the ailments she helped her mother treat. "And your father?" he interrupted. "Taken by fever when I was young," Alaric nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Mine was taken by ambition, his own and others." He straightened, changing course. "I reviewed the tax records from your province. The eastern villages suffered poor harvests these past 3 seasons, yet your royal tribute remained consistent. We had enough, barely but enough. And the new aqueduct tax, the one supposedly funding water improvements for outlying villages?" Ilara hesitated, sensing dangerous ground. "We've seen no aqueduct construction." The king's expression hardened. "As I suspected." He moved to a large map spread across a table. "My ministers insist all provincial projects proceed as planned. Perhaps your Majesty's ministers don't visit villages like mine." "No, they certainly don't." He gestured for her to approach. "Show me where the supposed construction should be." She pointed to a river junction east of her village. Their hands nearly touched over the map, and Ilara felt a strange current in the air between them. "You question my judgment in choosing a village, Omega," he said abruptly, watching her face. "Everyone does, though few dare say it aloud. I question being taken from my home without choice. Kings rarely explain themselves," he replied. "But I will tell you this, bloodlines matter. Yet something stronger flows in this kingdom, something ancient that shapes our future." His gaze intensified. "I've had Omegas paraded before me for years. Noble daughters with impeccable lineage, none suitable. And a village herb-gatherer is?" "You looked at me," he said quietly, "at the festival. Not at my crown or my guards or my power, but at me. That hasn't happened in a very long time." Alaric stepped closer. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an energy neither fully understood. He reached for his signet ring, offering it to her. "A test," he explained. "Touch it." Hesitantly, Ilara extended her hand. The moment her fingers contacted the cold metal, a spark leapt between them. The ring turned frost-white, emanating a chill that misted the air around her palm. Alaric's eyes widened. "What?" she began. "Interesting," he murmured, taking the ring back. The metal immediately returned to normal in his grasp. "Very interesting." A sharp knock interrupted them. Lady Beatrice entered with a scroll in hand. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. The northern delegation has arrived early." Alaric's jaw tightened with annoyance. "We're finished for now." He turned to Ilara, Tomorrow you'll attend court. Listen, observe, and speak to no one without my permission." As she was escorted back to her chambers, Ilara heard whispers following her through the corridors. Servants and nobles alike stared openly, some with curiosity, others with undisguised contempt. "The common Omega," one courtier murmured, loud enough to be heard, "who thinks to birth our future king." In her room, Ilara stared at her hand where the ring had touched. The skin remained cold hours later, as if marked by something beyond her understanding. The royal court gathered in the grand hall, a sea of silks and jewels beneath vaulted ceilings. Ilara stood near a marble column, clothed in a gown of deep blue that Lady Beatrice had selected with obvious reluctance. The pendant lay hidden beneath her bodice, warm against her skin. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? A smooth voice startled her. A man approached, his resemblance to King Alaric unmistakable, though his features were arranged in a perpetual smile rather than the king's stern countenance. "Prince Dorian, the king's cousin and advisor." He offered a slight bow. "And you're the village curiosity everyone's whispering about." Ilara curtsied as she'd been taught. "Your Highness, tell me," he continued, circling her like a predator, "what special quality does a common Omega possess to catch our king's discerning eye? He's rejected duchesses and foreign princesses, yet chooses you." Before she could respond, trumpets announced the king's arrival. Alaric entered, resplendent in formal attire, the crown resting heavy on his brow. His gaze swept the hall, pausing briefly when he found Ilara. Something unreadable passed across his features before he took his throne. Court proceedings began. Land disputes, trade agreements, minor nobles seeking royal favors. Ilara observed the intricate dance of politics, noting how Prince Dorian whispered frequently to a cluster of advisors, their eyes occasionally darting her way. "The Lady Beatrice reports you've been exploring the palace," Dorian murmured, appearing again at her side. "Found our library, I hear. Unusual interests for an Omega. Knowledge serves everyone, Your Highness." Indeed, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Knowledge of one's proper place, most of all. The day progressed into evening, court giving way to a formal dinner. Servants directed Ilara to a seat far down the table from Alaric, beside lesser nobles, who pointedly ignored her presence. Prince Dorian, however, sat at the king's right hand, leaning close in animated conversation. Lady Beatrice appeared with a goblet of wine. "The prince thought you might be thirsty," she said, placing it before Ilara. As Ilara reached for the cup, her pendant suddenly burned hot against her skin. She hesitated, fingers hovering above the rim. A strange scent, barely perceptible beneath the wine's aroma, made her pause. "Is something wrong?" Lady Beatrice asked, tone sharpening. "I'm not accustomed to wine," Ilara replied, withdrawing her hand. Later, as she returned to her chambers, she overheard voices from an alcove ahead. "The northern provinces grow restless," Prince Dorian said. "Your father would have crushed their rebellion years ago." "My father's methods created more enemies than allies," Alaric replied. "And your methods?" "Choosing a village Omega rather than securing a powerful alliance through marriage." "The court questions your judgment, cousin. The court will obey their king." Ilara retreated silently, but not before catching Dorian's final words. Kings can be replaced. Sleep eluded her that night. When she finally slipped into dreams, visions of her pendant glowing with blinding light startled her awake. Dawn found her at the window, watching palace guards drill in the courtyard below. Among them stood Alaric, sword in hand, demonstrating combat techniques with skill that belied his royal status. A knock announced Lady Beatrice. "The king requests your presence at breakfast." In the private dining room, Alaric sat alone, documents spread before him. He dismissed the servants as Ilara entered. "You didn't drink the wine last night," he stated without preamble. Ilara stilled. "I'm not accustomed to it. The goblet has been examined. It contained nightshade." Her breath caught. "Prince Dorian makes no moves without careful planning," Alaric finished, his expression grim. "Tell me, how did you know?" She touched her pendant unconsciously. "A feeling. Nothing more." He studied her with renewed interest. "Sit, eat." He pushed a plate toward her. My food taster checked everything personally. As she hesitantly took a seat, Alaric continued reviewing documents. "The court wonders why I chose you," he said after a long silence. "They create elaborate theories about village girls bewitching kings. And the truth," his gaze lifted to hers, "the truth is rarely simple. But it begins with this kingdom's history and its future." He reached across the table, his fingers almost touching hers. "Something is changing, Alara of Willowbrook. I feel it. And somehow you stand at its center." Alaric stood alone in the royal armory, surrounded by weapons that had served generations of his bloodline. His fingers traced the worn leather grip of a child-sized training sword mounted on the wall, his first weapon given to him on his 5th birthday. The memories surfaced unbidden, sharp and clear, despite the passing years. "Again," his father had commanded, voice echoing across the training yard. Young Alaric, arms trembling with exhaustion, raised the wooden sword once more. "An Alpha King shows no weakness," King Rowan had instructed, delivering another punishing blow that sent the boy sprawling. "Weakness invites challenge. Challenge invites death. Lessons taught with bruises and blood. Lessons that shaped him into the ruler he now was." Alaric withdrew his hand from the training sword, his reflection distorted in its polished blade. 25 years had passed since that day. His father's reign had ended unexpectedly when Alaric was barely 20. A hunting accident, the official record stated. Few questioned it, though whispers of poison and treachery had followed him to the throne. A soft noise at the armory entrance pulled him from his thoughts. Ilara stood there, uncertainty in her posture. "Lady Beatrice said you wished to see me," she said. Alaric gestured for her to enter. "Do you know how to use any of these?" She approached cautiously. "My mother taught me to use a skinning knife for herbs." "Nothing like these. My mother taught me about herbs as well," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "Before she died." "I'm sorry," Ilara replied, genuine compassion in her voice. "It was long ago. I was 8. He reached for another weapon on the wall, a delicate silver dagger with a serpentine hilt. This was hers. The only thing of hers I was allowed to keep." "Allowed?" "My father believed sentiment weakened a king. After her death, he burned her possessions. I hid this in the stables." Alaric returned the dagger to its place. Queen Isolde was different from the other nobles. She came from the Western Mountains, an arranged marriage, but my father grew to care for her in his way. What happened to her?" "Childbirth. My brother lived barely an hour after she died." His jaw tightened. "My father never spoke her name again. The only queen he acknowledged was the crown." Ilara's gaze traveled across the weapons. "And you followed his example?" "I've tried to be different," Alaric said, moving to the window that overlooked the training grounds. The Northern Rebellion began under his rule. Villages taxed beyond endurance. Omegas treated as property rather than people. Yet some things remain the same. Ilara observed quietly. Alaric turned to face her. "Some traditions are not easily broken, even by a king, especially by a king. The crown is heavier than it appears, weighted with the expectations of those who came before." A comfortable silence fell between them as they walked among the displays. Alaric paused before a massive battle-axe. "My first real battle," he said, nodding toward it. 17 years old, sent to quell a border dispute. "My father expected me to fail, to learn humility through defeat. Did you?" "No, I succeeded." It angered him more than failure would have. They continued through the armory until they reached a simple wooden box on a pedestal. Alaric opened it, revealing a crown much older than the one he wore for court functions. The original crown, forged when the first Alpha King united the warring territories, he explained. "Legend says only a true ruler can bear its weight without pain, and can you?" Ilara asked. A shadow crossed his features. "Some days." He closed the box. "The northern provinces threaten rebellion again. Their grievances are not without merit, but I cannot appear weak by yielding to demands. Perhaps strength isn't always shown through force," Ilara suggested. Alaric studied her, seeing beyond the simple village Omega to the intelligence and compassion that had first caught his attention. A dangerous idea in these halls. Their conversation was interrupted by a royal messenger. "Your Majesty, the Council awaits your decision on the northern taxes." "I'll join them shortly," Alaric replied, dismissing the messenger. He turned back to Ilara. "Tomorrow you'll accompany me to the council chamber. I'm curious how they'll react to your presence. As an observer, as whatever you choose to be." He moved toward the door, then paused. "My father would never have permitted a woman, especially an Omega, in council matters. That is one tradition I'm willing to break." Ilara watched him leave, seeing for the first time the weight he carried, not just of the crown, but of a legacy built on deep in the palace library. Ilara's fingers trailed along ancient spines, drawn to a section cordoned off by velvet ropes. The royal librarian had fallen asleep at his desk, his snores providing cover as she slipped under the barrier. Something called to her here, a whisper she felt rather than heard. A leather-bound tome on a high shelf seemed to pulse with energy that matched her pendant's warmth. Standing on tiptoe, she eased it from its place, dust clouding the air as she opened the cover. The title page read, "Histories of the Omega Bloodlines, Truths and Prophecies." The text was written in an old dialect, yet she found she could understand it with surprising ease. "Magic flows in the veins of those marked by the crescent moon," she read. "Fingers tracing illustrations of women with glowing hands, tending to the sick. Calming storms, making barren fields bloom. The Omega gifts suppressed and forgotten. Await the one who will restore balance to the realm." She turned pages, absorbing accounts of Omega healers and seers whose powers had once been revered, not dismissed. Then came darker chapters. The Alpha Kings of the past century systematically stripping Omegas of positions of influence, relegating them to domestic roles, rewriting history to diminish their importance. Ilara's pendant grew hotter as she read about the crescent moon birthmark, the sign of an Omega with exceptional power. Instinctively, her hand went to her shoulder blade, where her own crescent-shaped birthmark had always been hidden beneath clothing. A noise startled her. Hastily returning the book, she retreated, mind racing with revelations. The strange occurrences throughout her life, plants responding to her emotions, animals calmed by her presence, the inexplicable knowing of which herbs would heal which ailments, suddenly made sense. That night, alone in her chambers, Ilara experimented. Focusing on a wilting flower in a vase, she channeled her energy toward it, imagining life flowing from her fingers. The blossom gradually straightened, color returning to its petals. When she finally released her focus, exhaustion swept through her, but elation followed. This power was real, and it was hers. The next morning, while walking in the garden, she came upon a young servant girl who had fallen and scraped her knee badly. The child wept quietly, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Let me help," Ilara said, kneeling beside her. Glancing around to ensure they were alone, she placed her hands over the wound, concentrating as she had with the flower. Warmth flowed from her fingers, and beneath them, the torn skin knit together. The girl's eyes widened. "How did you—" "A healer's trick from my village," Ilara said quickly. "Tell no one." As the child scampered away, Ilara sensed eyes on her back. Lady Beatrice stood partially concealed behind a hedge, her expression calculating before she hurried away toward the east wing, where Prince Dorian's chambers were located. That afternoon, Ilara attended the royal council as Alaric had requested. Nobles shifted uncomfortably at her presence, while Prince Dorian's gaze remained fixed on her with new intensity. "The northern provinces report poor harvests again," one advisor stated. "They seek tax relief." "Impossible," countered another. "The crown's coffers require steady revenue, especially with the upcoming military campaign." Alaric's expression remained impassive. "What causes these continuing crop failures?" The advisors exchanged glances. "Bad soil, Your Majesty. Nothing to be done." Ilara felt a stirring of knowledge, unbidden and certain. The words left her lips before she could stop them. "It's not the soil. It's the water source." Silence fell. Every head turned toward her. "Explain," Alaric commanded. Ignoring the shocked expressions around them, The northern mining operations have tainted the river that feeds their irrigation channels, she continued, knowledge flowing through her with uncanny precision. The same symptoms appear in plants near the copper mines in my region. Preposterous, Prince Dorian interjected. The mines are vital to our economy. Alaric studied her. You speak with unusual certainty. My mother taught me to observe nature's patterns, she replied, the half-truth tasting bitter. Later, as Ilara returned to her chambers, she found Alaric waiting. His expression troubled. Your assessment was correct, he said without preamble. I dispatched riders to test the water. It contains mining waste. Will you help them? I've ordered the mining operation suspended until proper containment can be implemented. His eyes narrowed. How did you know? Before she could answer, a servant rushed in. Your Majesty! A fight has broken out between the northern delegates and the mining guild representatives. As Alaric hurried away, Ilara's dreams that night became more vivid. Ancient Omega women gathered in circles, their combined power healing the land, blessing births, guiding rulers with wisdom. In her dream, they turned to her, beckoning, their voices clear. Morning mist clung to the royal gardens as Ilara followed a stone path to its heart. Weeks had passed since her arrival, the initial fear giving way to a cautious adaptation to palace life. She had taken to walking alone at dawn, before the courtiers emerged to fill the day with their intrigues. You're up early, came a familiar voice. Alaric stood beside a rosebush, pruning shears in hand, his formal attire replaced by a simple linen shirt and riding breeches. Without his crown and royal regalia, he appeared almost ordinary, though no amount of plain clothing could disguise the power in his bearing. I didn't know the king tended his own gardens, Ilara remarked, surprised by the domestic scene. Few do, he replied, carefully cutting a stem. My mother taught me. She said a man who nurtures life understands the true meaning of strength. He gestured for her to join him beside a section of unusual blue roses, their color so deep they appeared almost violet in the early light. These were her favorite. They bloom nowhere else in the kingdom. He handed her one perfect specimen. They require special care. Too much sun withers them. Too much shade weakens them. Like people, Ilara observed, accepting the rare bloom. Indeed. His fingers brushed hers in the exchange, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. The council was impressed by your insight yesterday. The mining guild less so. Will there be consequences? For them, perhaps. The northern villages have suffered enough. He set down his shears, studying her with newfound appreciation. Walk with me. There's more to these gardens than most are permitted to see. They passed through an ornate iron gate into a walled sanctuary, where fruit trees and herb gardens thrived in. Orderly rows, the palace kitchen garden, he explained, though it serves another purpose as well. He led her to a section filled with medicinal herbs, many rare varieties she recognized from her mother's teachings. You maintain healing plants? Another of my mother's legacies. She believed rulers should understand not just warfare, but healing. His expression softened with memory. She would have liked you. The simple statement affected Ilara more than expected. They continued in comfortable silence until reaching a small pavilion overlooking a pond where white swans glided across the surface. I come here to think, Alaric said, away from advisors and expectations. And what occupies a king's thoughts? She asked. Lately, his gaze met hers. The mystery of an Omega who knows things she shouldn't, who affects the signet ring as no one has before, who speaks in council with wisdom beyond her years. Ilara's heart quickened. Perhaps you underestimate village education. Perhaps you underestimate my perception. He stepped closer. There's more to you than you reveal, Ilara of Willowbrook. Before she could respond, a swan rose from the water with a startled cry. A moment later, the pavilion floor cracked beneath them. Alaric moved instinctively, pulling Ilara against him as part of the structure collapsed into the pond below. They landed hard on the remaining platform, his body sheltering hers, faces inches apart. For a breathless moment, They remained thus, the unexpected intimacy more startling than their near fall. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice rough with concern. "No," she managed, acutely aware of his proximity, the strength in the arm still protectively encircling her. He helped her to her feet, examining the broken section. "This pavilion was rebuilt just last season." His expression darkened. "This was no accident. Guards arrived, summoned by the noise." As they escorted them back to the palace, Ilara noticed Prince Dorian, watching from an upper window, his face unreadable before he withdrew. That afternoon, she was summoned to Alaric's private study. He stood before a map of the kingdom, marking territories with small flags. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he announced. "Border disputes require my presence." "For how long?" "A week, perhaps more." He turned to face her. "Prince Dorian will remain as regent. I've instructed the captain of my personal guard to ensure your safety in my absence. You believe I'm in danger." "I believe someone is testing boundaries." His expression was grave. "Be cautious, especially around my cousin." As he rolled the map, his sleeve pulled back, revealing a fresh bandage on his arm, an injury from their fall that morning that he hadn't mentioned. "You're hurt," she said, stepping forward without thinking. "It's nothing. Let me see." The healer's daughter in her took precedence over protocol. Surprisingly, he complied, extending his arm. She unwrapped the bandage to reveal a deep gash. With a quick glance at the closed door, she placed her hand over the wound, focusing her energy as she had been practicing in secret. Warmth flowed from her fingers, and beneath them, the wound began to close. Alaric watched in stunned silence, his eyes moving from his healing arm to her face. 5 days had passed since Alaric's departure. 5 days of increased scrutiny from Lady Beatrice and careful avoidance of Prince Dorian's calculating gaze. Ilara had taken to practicing her abilities in the pre-dawn hours, slowly gaining control over the energy that flowed through her with increasing strength. On the 6th morning, a royal messenger arrived at her door. "The king returns tonight," he announced. "A victory celebration will be held. Prince Dorian commands your attendance." Lady Beatrice arrived shortly after with seamstresses in tow. "We must make you presentable," she said, lips pursed in disapproval. Why the prince insists you attend is beyond comprehension." Servants filled Ilara's chambers with fabrics and jewels. Among them, a silver gown caught her eye, its material shimmering like moonlight on water. When she touched it, her pendant responded with familiar warmth. "That one is unsuitable," Lady Beatrice declared. "Far too fine for—" "That one will do perfectly," interrupted a silky voice. Prince Dorian stood in the doorway, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Our village flower should bloom spectacularly tonight. The king's unexpected victory has put him in high favor. All eyes will be on his chosen companion." Hours later, Ilara stood before a mirror, barely recognizing herself. The silver gown, fit as if created specifically for her form, cascading like liquid moonlight to the floor. Her hair, usually braided simply, had been arranged in an elegant style adorned with small crystal pins. As the seamstress made final adjustments, Ilara sensed the pendant's energy flowing into the fabric of the gown, threads of light almost visible beneath the silver material. She closed her eyes, focusing on containing the power that seemed determined to manifest. "Magnificent," murmured the seamstress, stepping back. "Like something from the old legends." Lady Beatrice's expression soured further. "Remember your place tonight," she warned, as they proceeded toward the grand hall. "You may wear fine clothes, but you remain a village omega among noble alphas." The celebration was already underway when they arrived. Nobles from across the kingdom mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their finery no less spectacular than during court functions. Musicians played from a balcony, the melody carrying over conversations and laughter. All activity paused as Ilara entered. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through summer wheat. She kept her gaze forward, ignoring the judgment in their eyes. At the far end of the hall, seated on his throne, Alaric watched her approach. Even at a distance, she could see tension in his posture, fatigue in the lines of his face. When their eyes met, something shifted in his expression, surprise followed by something deeper, more profound. Prince Dorian stepped forward, interrupting their silent exchange. "Your Majesty, may I present the Omega Ilara, specially adorned for your victorious return." Alaric descended from the dais, his movements measured and deliberate. "Ilara," he said, her name alone on his lips sounding like both question and answer. He extended his hand, breaking protocol by inviting her to join him directly, rather than remaining at a respectful distance. The court's collective intake of breath was audible as she placed her fingers in his. "You've been well in my absence?" he asked quietly as he led her to a place beside his throne. "Well enough," she replied, noting the new scar at his temple, partially hidden by his crown. "And your border dispute?" "Resolved, though not without cost." Something haunted lurked behind his words. The celebration continued around them, nobles offering congratulations, foreign dignitaries presenting gifts. Through it all, Alaric kept Ilara near, occasionally seeking her reaction with a glance when particularly outlandish praises were heaped upon him. When the formal dances began, tradition demanded the king lead with a partner of his choosing. Without hesitation, he turned to Ilara. "I don't know the court dances," she whispered as he guided her to the center of the hall. "Follow my lead," he replied, "as I've found myself following yours in matters of greater consequence." They moved together with unexpected harmony, her dress shimmering with each turn, responding to her emotions. Those watching closest might have noticed the faint glow emanating from the fabric, like starlight woven into silver threads. From the edge of the hall, Prince Dorian observed them, his conversation with a group of stern-faced nobles from the eastern provinces growing more intense by the moment. Lady Beatrice hovered nearby, passing him what appeared to be a small scroll. As the dance ended, Alaric kept hold of Ilara's hand. "We need to speak privately," he said, his voice low. "Tonight, after the festivities. About what happened before you left. About what I discovered while away." His gaze was somber. The celebration continued well into the night, but Ilara's attention remained fixed on Alaric's promise of a private conversation. When he finally signaled for her to follow him to a secluded balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens, her heart quickened with anticipation. "You've changed since I left," he observed, studying her face in the silver light. "Your powers are growing stronger." She didn't bother denying it. "How did you know about them?" "Before I healed you. Legends speak of Omegas with gifts beyond ordinary understanding. For generations, my family suppressed these stories." His fingers brushed the stone balustrade. "During the border negotiations, I met an elder from the mountain tribes. She spoke of ancient bloodlines and powers reawakening. Did she mention a crescent moon birthmark?" Alaric's eyes widened slightly. "You have it?" Ilara nodded. "On my shoulder blade." He stepped closer, his usual regal composure softening. "When you healed me, I felt your energy flowing into me. It was unlike anything I've experienced. It's becoming harder to control," she admitted. "Tonight, during the dance, the gown itself seemed to respond to my emotions." I noticed, his voice lowered. As did others. "We must be cautious." A servant passed by the open doors with a tray of wine goblets. Alaric took two, offering one to Ilara. "Two unexpected discoveries," he said, raising his cup. They drank in companionable silence, the night air cool against their skin. Below in the gardens, the blue roses glowed faintly in the moonlight. "Why did you really choose me that day in the village?" Ilara finally asked. "Was it because you suspected what I was?" "No," Alaric replied, his gaze steady on hers. "I chose you because when our eyes met across that festival ground, something ancient and powerful stirred within me. Something that had nothing to do with being alpha or king." He set down his goblet and moved closer, his hand rising to gently touch her cheek. "The prophecies only confirmed what I already knew in that moment." The air between them seemed charged with the same energy that coursed through her veins. When he leaned forward, his intention clear, Ilara met him halfway. Their lips touched, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty, a surge of power rushed through her at the contact, her pendant burning hot against her skin. Without warning, a flash of vision opened between them, his thoughts flowing into hers, her emotions pouring into him. Images cascaded through their shared consciousness. Alaric as a child, learning to suppress tears. Ilara healing a wounded fox in secret, his loneliness on the throne. Her fear of her own abilities. Alaric pulled back abruptly, his expression a mixture of wonder and alarm. "What was that?" "I don't know," Ilara whispered, equally shaken. "It's never happened before." He took a step backward, his training reasserting itself. "This is unexpected." A discreet cough interrupted them. The captain of Alaric's personal guard stood at attention. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty. An urgent matter requires your attention." Alaric's expression hardened into the familiar mask of kingship. "Wait here," he told Ilara. "We'll continue this discussion shortly." As he departed with the guard, Ilara remained on the balcony, fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. The connection they'd shared in that moment had been more intimate than anything physical, a joining of minds and spirits that transcended ordinary experience. Lady Beatrice appeared in the doorway, a steaming cup in hand. "You look flushed. Some herbal tea to calm your nerves." Ilara accepted the cup, her thoughts still tangled in the aftermath of the kiss. "Thank you. Enjoying the king's attentions." Lady Beatrice's tone held an edge. "Such favor is rarely lasting." Ilara sipped the tea, tasting mint and something bitter beneath. "You disapprove." "I serve the kingdom's best interests." Lady Beatrice's smile tightened. "As all loyal subjects should." A sudden dizziness washed over Ilara. She gripped the balustrade, the cup slipping from her fingers and shattering on the stone floor. "What have you—" Her voice slurred as her vision blurred. Lady Beatrice watched dispassionately. "Nothing personal, girl. Politics requires sacrifices." As darkness closed in, Ilara saw Prince Dorian step from the shadows. Through dimming consciousness, she reached for the pendant, trying to channel her power against whatever poison now coursed through her veins. Too late, she felt rough hands lifting her, her connection to her magic slipping away like water through fingers. Her last coherent thought was of a folded parchment she'd glimpsed in Dorian's hand. A message bearing the seal of neighboring kingdoms. Words like consciousness returned slowly, like swimming up through murky water. Stone walls surrounded Ilara, the only light filtering through a narrow window set high in the circular chamber. A tower room, she realized, rising unsteadily from the simple pallet bed. Her pendant was gone. The absence of its familiar weight left her feeling exposed, vulnerable. Without it, her connection to her power felt muted, though not entirely severed. Finally awake, Prince Dorian leaned against the doorframe, regarding her with clinical interest. "The dose was perhaps stronger than necessary. What have you done with the king?" Her voice rasped from thirst. "My cousin." Dorian smiled thinly. "Mourning your tragic departure. Lady Beatrice provided a convincing tale of your midnight flight from the palace, overcome by the pressure of court life, returning to your simple village existence." "He won't believe that. He already does." "Your rejection wounded his pride deeply." Dorian stepped into the room. "Alpha Kings don't take rejection well, particularly from Omegas they've favored." Ilara assessed her surroundings. A chamber high in what must be one of the palace's forgotten towers. Sparse furnishings, a single guarded door. Her gaze caught on something glinting between the stones of the wall near her bed. "Why keep me alive?" she asked, keeping Dorian's attention on her face rather than her discovery. "Insurance, hostage, experiment." He shrugged elegantly. "I'm curious about your apparent influence over my cousin. And these abilities whispered about by the servants. I have no abilities beyond those of any village healer. We both know that's not true." He moved toward the door. "Rest, recover your strength. We have much to discuss in the coming days." After he departed, Ilara heard the heavy lock engage. Immediately, she moved to the wall, prying at the glinting object she'd noticed. A bracelet emerged from between the stones, its moonstone centerpiece glowing faintly in the dim light. Something ancient, hidden perhaps by a previous occupant of this prison. The moment her fingers closed around it, warmth spread up her arm. Though not her pendant, this too was an artifact of Omega power. She slipped it onto her wrist, feeling her abilities strengthen instantly. Not enough to escape, but enough to begin. Days passed in isolation, interrupted only by servants bringing meals and occasional visits from Prince Dorian, probing for information about her powers. Each night, Alara practiced with the bracelet, learning to focus her energy in new ways. She discovered she could project her consciousness beyond the tower walls, observing palace activities like a ghostly witness. On the seventh night, she attempted something more ambitious, reaching for the mind she had briefly touched during that kiss. Focusing on the memory of their connection, Alara sent her consciousness searching for Alaric. She found him in his private chambers, poring over maps, his expression haggard with exhaustion and something deeper, grief. The connection was tenuous, like viewing him through rippled glass. He couldn't see or hear her, but when she concentrated on sending a single thought, "I'm still here," he paused, looking up as if hearing a distant call, night after night. She strengthened this tenuous link, sending images rather than words. The tower room, Prince Dorian's visits, glimpses of her location. During daylight hours, she continued to build her strength, the moonstone bracelet growing warmer as her powers expanded. In her dream-walking state, she witnessed Alaric growing increasingly restless, questioning Lady Beatrice about inconsistencies in her story, ordering searches of the surrounding countryside. She saw Prince Dorian meeting with foreign emissaries in secret chambers, planning the coup that would remove his cousin from the throne. On the 15th night of her captivity, a new vision came, not sent by her, but received. Ancient Omega women gathered in a circle, their hands joined, power flowing between them like a visible current. They showed her images of the kingdom's founding, when Alpha Kings and Omega Queens ruled together in balanced partnership. Their complementary powers maintaining harmony. The balance was broken, they told her in the vision. Magic suppressed, bloodlines separated. The time of restoration approaches. They taught her techniques to amplify her abilities, showing how the moonstone bracelet could serve as a conduit for power, just as her pendant had done. When she woke, Alara felt changed, stronger, more certain. Placing her palm against the stone wall, she channeled energy through the bracelet. The stones vibrated beneath her touch, ancient mortar crumbling slightly. Not enough to escape, not yet. But soon, that night when she reached for Alaric's mind, the connection snapped into focus with unexpected clarity. For a brief moment, their consciousness merged as it had during their kiss. His shock resonated through their link. "Alara? Find me!" she projected, showing him the tower, the winding stair, the view from her window. "Dorian plans to take your throne." The connection broke, leaving her drained but hopeful. In the days that followed, she sensed increased activity in the palace through her dream-walking. Guards changing patterns, Alaric questioning servants, Prince Dorian accelerating his plans with growing desperation. Alaric stood alone in his chambers, staring at the portrait that had been completed just days before Alara's disappearance. The artist had captured something essential about her, the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture. He'd ordered it hung in his private study rather than the royal gallery, unwilling to share this image with the court. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the celebration. 3 weeks of growing doubt about Lady Beatrice's account of Alara fleeing in the night, overwhelmed by court pressures. It contradicted everything he knew of her character, everything he'd felt in that brief, extraordinary moment when their minds had touched. And now these dreams, vivid, urgent visions of Alara in a tower room, sending him images that felt more like memories than imagination. Last night's connection had been so clear, he'd nearly ordered an immediate search of the palace towers. Only years of caution had held him back, forcing him to gather evidence first. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, turning from the portrait. Captain Reynard, commander of his personal guard, and one of the few men Alaric trusted implicitly, stepped into the room. The surveillance you ordered on Lady Beatrice has yielded results, Reynard reported. She meets with Prince Dorian daily in the East Wing, away from their usual council chambers. And the documents I requested. Here, Your Majesty. Reynard handed him a sealed portfolio. Records of all palace movements on the night of the celebration, including guard rotations and servant assignments. Alaric spread the papers across his desk, scanning for inconsistencies. There, he said, pointing to an entry. The North Tower Guard was reassigned just before midnight, replaced by one of Dorian's men, the same tower that appears abandoned but is occasionally provisioned by kitchen staff loyal to the prince. Alaric's jaw tightened. Prepare a small detachment of your most trusted men. Tonight we investigate, but with utmost discretion. And if we find her, then my cousin has committed treason. Alaric's voice was cold as winter iron, but we need more than suspicion. We need proof of his broader plans. After Reynard departed, Alaric returned to the portrait, memories of the kiss replaying in his mind. The unexpected merging of their consciousness had shaken him deeply. In that moment, he'd felt her essence, pure, powerful, unlike anything in his experience. It had awakened something within him, something that resonated with ancient knowledge buried in his bloodline. The dreams that followed her disappearance only deepened the connection. Last night he'd heard her voice clearly in his mind. Find me. Dorian plans to take your throne. Alaric paced his chambers, restless with forced patience. His instinct demanded immediate action, but the strategic ruler in him knew better. Prince Dorian had cultivated powerful allies over the years. Moving against him without evidence would risk civil war. A second knock drew his attention. Lady Beatrice entered, her face carefully composed. Your Majesty, I've come to inquire about your journey tomorrow. The arrangements are cancelled, Alaric interrupted. State matters require my presence here. Surprise flickered across her features before she masked it. May I ask what matters have arisen so suddenly? You may not. He studied her, this woman who had served the palace for decades. Tell me, Lady Beatrice, how long have you served my family? Since your father's early reign, Your Majesty. And your loyalty has always been to the crown? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Always. Not to the person who wears it? She didn't answer immediately. The distinction is important? Increasingly so. Alaric dismissed her with a wave, noting how quickly she departed. As evening approached, Alaric made a decision that surprised even himself. He ordered his horse prepared and rode alone to the village of Willowbrook. The journey took several hours, darkness falling before he reached the collection of modest cottages. His appearance, dressed in simple travelling clothes without royal insignia, caused little stir as he inquired after the healer's home. Maeve, Ilara's mother, showed no surprise when she opened her door to find the king on her threshold. I wondered when you would come, she said simply. Inviting him inside, the cottage was neat but humble, herbs hanging from the rafters, a fire burning low in the hearth. On the table lay an open book, the same text Alaric had found in the restricted section of the palace, library detailing the ancient partnership between Alpha Kings and Omega Queens. You know why I'm here, he said. Maeve nodded. My daughter didn't flee your palace. She would have returned to me if she had. When did you know what she was? From her birth. Maeve touched the crescent-shaped birthmark on her own wrist, smaller than Ilara's but unmistakable. The power runs in our bloodline, though weaker with each generation. Until Ilara. There are prophecies, Alaric began. I know them well. She fixed him with a penetrating gaze. As did your mother. Queen Isolde was one of us, though her abilities were kept secret from your father. Alaric stared at her, pieces of a puzzle long fragmented suddenly aligning. His mother's mysterious knowledge, her connection to the blue roses, her whispered stories of balance and harmony. Find her, Maeve said, pressing something into his hand. A small vial of clear liquid. When you do, her pendant must be restored to her. Without it, her power remains incomplete. How do you know she's lost it? Maeve's smile held ancient wisdom. A mother knows when her child... The full moon bathed the tower room in silver light, illuminating Alara as she knelt in its center. The moonstone bracelet glowed with an inner fire, responding to her focused energy. For weeks, she had prepared for this moment, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect alignment of circumstances. Tonight, she felt something different in the air, a sense of urgency, of time running short. Through her dream walks, she had witnessed Prince Dorian finalizing plans with foreign allies. The coup would come with the dawn. Placing her palms against the stone floor, Alara channeled her power through the bracelet. The moonstone pulsed with increasing brightness as she drew energy from the full moon above, her birthmark burning with answering heat against her shoulder blade. "Remember who you are," she whispered, echoing the ancient omegas from her visions. Power surged through her in a blinding wave. The stones beneath her hands began to glow with the same silvery light as the bracelet, spreading outward in concentric circles. The air around her shimmered with visible energy. Outside her door, the guard shouted in alarm. The lock mechanism began to rattle, then glow white-hot. With a sound like shattering glass, it exploded outward, metal fragments embedding themselves in the opposite wall. Alara rose to her feet as the door swung open. The guard stared in shock, his sword half drawn. Before he could react, she gestured sharply. Invisible force lifted him from his feet and pinned him against the wall. "Where is my pendant?" she demanded, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "Prince Dorian keeps it on his person," the guard gasped, eyes wide with fear. Alara released him, watching him crumple to the floor, unconscious but alive. She stepped into the stairwell, her senses expanded beyond normal perception. She could feel the presence of minds throughout the palace, servants asleep in their quarters, guards at their posts, and somewhere below, a familiar consciousness that called to her own. Alaric had returned, moving silently down the winding stairs. Alara avoided the remaining guards by sensing their locations before she reached them. The palace she navigated was not the one she had known. In her heightened state of awareness, she perceived the ancient magic built into its very foundations, wards and protections laid by long-forgotten omegas. Dormant for generations, but still potent, she reached the bottom of the tower and slipped into a hidden passage she'd discovered during her dream walks, one of many secret ways through the palace known only to a select few. The passage led behind the walls of the main corridors, allowing her to move unseen toward Prince Dorian's private chambers. Voices reached her through a ventilation grate. She paused, listening intently. "The eastern and northern provinces have pledged their support," came Dorian's voice. "Their forces will arrive by midday tomorrow." "And the king?" asked another voice, one of the foreign delegates she had observed in her visions. "Will be dealt with tonight. The official story will be a tragic accident, grief over his Omega's departure leading to careless behavior." "What of the girl in the tower?" A pause, a regrettable casualty of the transition. "Her body will never be found." Alara continued through the passage until she reached a junction that would lead her either toward Dorian's chambers to reclaim her pendant or toward the king's wing to warn Alaric. She hesitated only a moment before choosing the latter path. The pendant could wait. Alaric's life could not. The passage ended behind a tapestry in a seldom-used corridor near the royal apartments. As she slipped from behind the heavy fabric, a hand closed around her arm. She turned, power gathering at her fingertips, only to find herself face to face with Captain Reynard. "Peace," he said quietly, releasing her. "The king has been searching for you. Dorian plans to kill him tonight," she said urgently. "We know. Come." He led her swiftly through back corridors to Alaric's private study. The door opened before they reached it, revealing Alaric himself, tension evident in every line of his body, until his eyes fell on Alara. Relief washed over his features, followed by something deeper, more profound. "You're real," he said simply, reaching for her hand as if to confirm her physical presence. "The dreams were me calling to you," she finished. "There's no time. Dorian moves against you tonight, and foreign troops march on the palace. My loyal guards have been positioned. Reynard has been gathering evidence of Dorian's treason for days, his fingers intertwined with hers, the connection between them humming with energy. But I never expected... He gestured to the faint glow still emanating from her skin, the moonstone bracelet pulsing with power. "There's much you don't know about me," Alara said. "About your own bloodline. I visited your mother," Alaric replied. "I know more than you might think, including what my mother truly was." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside, shouts and the clash of steel. Captain Reynard drew his sword. "They've moved earlier than expected." The royal war room buzzed with tense activity as Alaric gathered his most trusted advisors. Maps covered the central table, markers indicating loyalist forces and suspected rebel positions. Captain Reynard directed guards to secure critical areas of the palace while servants barricaded doors and windows against the approaching threat. "The Eastern Gate remains under our control," reported Commander Ellis, an older beta who had served since Alaric's father's time. "But we've received word that Lord Blackthorn's forces march from the north, flying Prince Dorian's banner." "How many?" Alaric demanded, leaning over the strategic war map. 500, perhaps more. "And within the palace?" "We've identified 37 guards loyal to the prince," Captain Reynard answered. "They've been contained, but Dorian himself has barricaded in the east wing with his personal guard and several foreign dignitaries." Alara stood slightly apart, watching the military minds work. The moonstone bracelet continued to pulse with energy, connecting her to currents of power flowing through the palace. She could sense the positions of Dorian's hidden supporters, clusters of hostile intent scattered throughout the royal residence. "There's another group," she said, stepping forward. "In the servants' quarters beneath the kitchen, or men disguised as staff." The advisors exchanged skeptical glances until Alaric nodded. "Send a detachment to investigate," he ordered. "If the Lady Alara senses danger there, we take it seriously." As guards departed to carry out the command, Alaric beckoned Alara closer to the map. "What else do you sense?" She placed her hand over the parchment, allowing her awareness to expand beyond physical sight. "Movements here and here," she indicated several locations. "And something else." Her fingers hovered over the ancient catacombs beneath the palace. "Something older, waiting." "The original throne room," murmured Lady Helena, the oldest advisor present and the only one who showed no surprise at Ilara's abilities, "where the first Alpha King and Omega Queen ruled in partnership before the Sundering." "The Sundering?" Ilara questioned. Lady Helena's eyes held ancient knowledge. "When balance was broken, when Alphas seized soul power and drove Omega magic into hiding." "This history lesson can wait," interrupted Commander Ellis. "We have immediate threats to address." "The history is the threat," Lady Helena countered. "And perhaps the solution." A messenger burst into the room. "The men in the servants' quarters have been captured, Your Majesty. They carried Eastern Province weapons, and this." He presented a sealed letter bearing Prince Dorian's crest, alongside that of the neighboring kingdom. Alaric broke the seal, his expression darkening as he read. "Confirmation of our suspicions. My cousin has promised parts of our territory in exchange for military support." He passed the letter to Captain Reynard. "Evidence of high treason, witnessed and documented." "We should strike now," urged Commander Ellis, "before their reinforcements arrive." "No," Alaric replied, surprising his advisors. "Direct confrontation plays to their advantage in numbers. We need a different approach." He turned to Alara. "You mentioned the original throne room. What did you sense there?" "Power," she answered simply. "Old magic, dormant but intact." "My mother once told me stories," Alaric said, his voice dropping so only those closest could hear, "of a time when the kingdom drew strength from the balanced union of Alpha and Omega energies, when rulers channeled power through ancient artifacts to protect their people." Lady Helena nodded slowly. "The crown of balance and the scepter of harmony. Lost since the Sundering." "Not lost," Alaric corrected. "Hidden. My mother showed me a secret passage on my 16th birthday, made me swear to remember it for a time of greatest need. You believe these artifacts could help us now? Captain Reynard asked, skepticism evident. I believe in covering all possibilities, Alaric replied. He addressed the room at large. Continue preparations for conventional defense. Secure the royal wing and the main courtyard. I want our most loyal forces protecting civilian areas of the palace. As the advisors dispersed to carry out his orders, Alaric drew Ilara aside. We need your pendant. You said Dorian keeps it on his person? Yes, I can sense it even now, like a part of myself kept just out of reach. I'll retrieve it, he said with quiet determination. That's too dangerous. He expects you to come for him, which is why I won't go alone. Alaric's gaze swept the room, landing on a small group of guards who had served him since his earliest days as king. A focused mission. Extract the pendant, avoid direct confrontation with Dorian himself for now, and while you do this, you and Lady Helena will investigate the catacombs. Find the ancient throne room, learn what you can about the artifacts my mother spoke of. Ilara could sense his conflict, the strategic king and the protective alpha battling within him. You don't want to be separated, she observed quietly. No, he admitted. But a king's wants must yield to necessity. Their hands found each other, fingers interlacing naturally. Through this contact, their unusual connection flared again. Thoughts and emotions flowing between them, his determination tinged with fear of losing her again. Her newfound strength tempered by concern for what was to come. When this is over, Alaric said softly, we must discuss what happens between us when we touch. If we survive, Ilara replied with a small smile. When, he corrected, bringing her hand briefly to his lip. Dawn broke over the palace with deceptive serenity, golden light filtering through stained glass windows into corridors that hummed with tension. The annual solstice festival would proceed as planned. Calculated risk on Alaric's part to maintain an appearance of normalcy, while positioning his forces strategically among the celebrations in the grand courtyard. Servants erected colorful pavilions as nobles and commoners alike began to gather. Musicians tuned their instruments, while vendors arranged their wares, unaware of the power struggle unfolding within the palace walls. Ilara followed Lady Helena through winding passages deep beneath the main structure, the older woman moving with surprising agility despite her years. The moonstone bracelet provided enough light to guide their way, its glow strengthening as they descended. Few remember these paths exist, Lady Helena explained, brushing cobwebs aside. I served Queen Isolde as handmaiden before her marriage to King Rowan. She was the last royal Omega, though her abilities were kept secret from all but a trusted few. Alaric's mother was like me, similar, though her powers were more subtle. Healing primarily, and occasionally foresight. Lady Helena paused at a junction, considering their path. The old stories say the first Omega Queen could command the elements themselves. They continued downward, the air growing heavy with age and forgotten magic. Ilara sensed they approached something significant, power thrumming in the stone around them like a heartbeat. Meanwhile, in the eastern wing, Alaric led a small contingent of his most trusted guards through servant passages toward Prince Dorian's chambers. Captain Reynard moved silently at his side, years of battlefield experience evident in his efficient movements. Remember, Alaric murmured to his men, our objective is the pendant only. Avoid confrontation if possible. As they positioned themselves outside the prince's private study, Alaric sensed a shift in the air, a stillness that raised the hair on his neck. Signaling his men to halt, he pressed his ear to the wall. Inside, Prince Dorian's voice carried clearly, "The time has come. Release our supporters from the dungeons and secure the central hall. The crown will be mine before sunset." "And the king?" asked another voice. Lady Beatrice, her betrayal now confirmed, already surrounded, though he doesn't yet realize it. "When he appears at the festival, my archers will ensure a swift transition of power." Alaric exchanged glances with Captain Reynard. Their timeline had just accelerated dramatically. Abandoning stealth Alaric gave the signal to breach the chamber. Guards burst through the doors, quickly subduing the startled conspirators. Prince Dorian, however, was nowhere to be seen. Only Lady Beatrice and 2 foreign emissaries remained, their shock quickly turning to defiance. "Where is he?" Alaric demanded, sword leveled at Lady Beatrice. "Beyond your reach," she replied with cold satisfaction. "As we speak, he approaches the festival grounds where your loyal subjects eagerly await their king's appearance." On the festival grounds, anticipation built among the gathered crowd. Nobles mingled with commoners, wine flowed freely, and performers delighted children with feats of juggling and acrobatics. Few noticed the subtle positioning of unfamiliar guards around the perimeter, their hands resting too casually on weapon hilts. Deep beneath the palace, Ilara and Lady Helena finally reached their destination, a vast circular chamber dominated by 2 stone thrones set upon a raised dais. Ancient symbols carved into the floor formed concentric circles around the platform, their patterns reminiscent of those on Ilara's pendant. "The original seat of power," Lady Helena whispered reverently, "where Alpha and Omega ruled as equals." Ilara approached the dais, drawn by an irresistible pull. As her foot touched the first step, the symbols on the floor began to glow with the same silvery light as her bracelet. The chamber awakened around them, dormant magic stirring after centuries of sleep. Behind the thrones stood a simple stone altar. Upon it rested a tarnished silver crown, smaller and less ostentatious than the one Alaric wore for state functions, but emanating a quiet power that resonated with Ilara's own abilities. "The crown of balance," Lady Helena confirmed, awe evident in her voice. "But the scepter of harmony is missing." Ilara's fingers hovered over the crown, hesitant to touch such an ancient artifact. "What does it do?" "Legend says it amplifies the natural bond between fated Alpha and Omega pairs, allowing them to channel their combined power to protect the realm." A distant commotion reached them, even through layers of stone, shouts, and the clash of weapons. The coup had begun in earnest. In the palace above, chaos erupted. Prince Dorian's hidden supporters revealed themselves, attacking loyal guards, while panicked servants and nobles fled in all directions. The ornate crown that symbolized the current monarchy, worn by generations of Alpha kings since the Sundering, had been taken from its protected chamber, blood staining its golden surface. Alaric fought his way toward the festival grounds, desperate to prevent the public bloodshed Dorian clearly intended. The pendant that should have been returned to Ilara remained undiscovered, its absence a weight on his conscience as the kingdom descended into the violence he had hoped to avoid. At the center of the celebration, Prince Dorian mounted the festival platform, the stolen crown held high for all to see. "People of the realm," he proclaimed, the festival grounds transformed into a battlefield within moments. Loyal citizens fled screaming, while Dorian supporters revealed hidden weapons. Royal guards clashed with rebel forces as nobles scrambled for safety, their finery incongruous amid the violence. Alaric cut through the chaos, Captain Reynard at his side. He caught glimpses of Prince Dorian moving toward the palace's main entrance, the stolen crown clutched in one hand, something small and glinting in the other. "Ilara's pendant, the throne room," Alaric shouted to Reynard over the din. "He's heading for a formal coronation to legitimize his claim." They fought their way forward, Alaric's sword moving with lethal precision. Years of training beyond what most kings received served him well now. Each stroke was measured, each movement economical, the warrior beneath the crown fully unleashed. "Your Majesty," called a rebel commander, stepping forward with drawn blade. "Prince Dorian offers mercy if you abdicate willingly." "Interesting," Alaric replied coldly. "I offer no such terms." Their swords met in a shower of sparks, the rebel's technique polished but predictable. Alaric countered each move methodically, his expression never changing, even as he drove his opponent steadily backward. When the opening came, his strike was swift and final. Inside the palace, Prince Dorian marched toward the throne room, flanked by elite guards and foreign allies. His expression combined triumph with barely controlled rage. "Find the Omega girl," he ordered Lady Beatrice. "She must not interfere with the coronation." "The old woman is missing too," Lady Beatrice reported. "They may have fled. They can't have gone far," Dorian snapped. "I want them found before I take the throne." Deep below, Ilara clutched the ancient crown of balance, its energy humming in harmony with her own. "We need to reach Alaric," she told Lady Helena. "This crown must be united with its rightful bearer." "There's something else," Lady Helena said, examining carvings on the altar. "A hidden compartment." Her fingers pressed a sequence of symbols, and with a grinding sound, a section of stone slid away, revealing a slender silver scepter topped with a crystal that caught the light from Ilara's bracelet. "The scepter of harmony," Ilara breathed, reaching for it instinctively. The moment her fingers closed around it, visions flooded her mind, centuries of Alpha and Omega rulers working in tandem, channeling combined power through these artifacts to protect their people. She saw the moment of betrayal when an ambitious Alpha King had seized sole control, suppressing Omega abilities, rewriting history to erase their importance. "We must hurry," she said, the urgency of centuries pressing upon her. "There's a faster way up." Following the pull of ancient knowledge now flowing through her, Ilara led Lady Helena to a concealed passage behind the thrones. They emerged minutes later in an antechamber adjacent to the main throne room, the sounds of approaching conflict echoing down marble corridors. In the grand hallway leading to the throne room, Alaric finally confronted his cousin. Their forces had cleared a space around them, the decisive battle between royal blood now inevitable. "It was always meant to be me," Dorian declared, drawing his sword. Around his neck hung Ilara's pendant on a gold chain, its energy visibly straining toward its rightful owner. "Your father knew it. Why do you think he died so conveniently before he could name me his successor?" Alaric's expression hardened. "What are you saying?" He recognized weakness in his own son. "Planned to change the succession." Dorian circled slowly, blade gleaming. "I merely hastened the inevitable? You killed my father?" The question emerged as a dangerous whisper. "I saved the kingdom from your inadequacy." Dorian lunged forward, his attack vicious and precise. Their swords met with force that sent vibrations up both men's arms. What Dorian possessed in technical skill, Alaric matched with raw power and battle-tested experience. They fought as they had been trained since childhood, two alphas raised to rule, only one destined to survive. "Your father was a fool," Dorian continued between strikes, attempting to provoke error. "And you follow his weakness, distracted by an Omega villager, seeking ancient fairy tales instead of securing proper alliances." "My father," Alaric replied, voice steady, despite the exertion of combat, for all his flaws, understood honor. Something you clearly never grasped. Their fight carried them through the grand doors into the throne room itself. The ancestral seat of power stood empty on its dais, witness to the blood being spilled for its possession. A desperate strike caught Alaric across his side. He stumbled, crimson staining his tunic as Dorian pressed his advantage. With a vicious kick, Dorian sent Alaric's sword skittering across the polished floor. The better man wins. "Cousin," Dorian said, raising his blade for the killing stroke. "Not yet," came Ilara's voice from the side chamber. She stood in the doorway, the ancient crown of balance in one hand, the scepter of harmony in the other. Lady Helena moved quickly to block the entrance against Dorian's remaining guards, Ilara's eyes fixed on her pendant around Dorian's neck. With a gesture from the scepter, the chain snapped. The pendant flew across the room to her waiting hand, reuniting with its rightful owner in a flash of brilliant light. "Parlor tricks won't save him," Dorian snarled, turning back to Alaric, but Alaric had already regained his feet, reaching for something that had lain forgotten against. The wall for generations. The ceremonial sword of the first Alpha King, the blade, gleamed as if newly forged as his hand closed around the hilt. When Ilara's eyes met his across the throne room, understanding passed between them. She tossed the crown of balance. Its silence fell across the throne room as Alaric caught the ancient crown. The moment his fingers touched its silver surface, a resonance filled the chamber, deep and sonorous, like the heartbeat of the kingdom itself. The ceremonial sword in his other hand blazed with golden light that danced along its edge. Prince Dorian faltered, uncertainty crossing his features for the first time. "What trickery is this?" "Not trickery," Alaric replied, his voice carrying new authority. "Legacy." With the pendant restored, Ilara felt her full power surge through her veins. The scepter in her hand responded, its crystal head emanating silvery light that complemented the golden glow of Alaric's sword. She moved to stand beside him, ancient instinct guiding her actions. Dorian snarled and lunged forward, blade aimed at Alaric's heart. Time seemed to slow as Alaric and Ilara moved in perfect synchronization, her scepter directing a shield of energy while his sword swept in a devastating arc. The ceremonial blade sheared through Dorian's weapon as if it were parchment, sending the prince stumbling backward. "Yield," Alaric commanded, the crown of balance now resting on his brow. "Your conspiracy is finished." Beyond the throne room doors, the sounds of combat diminished as news spread of Prince Dorian's defeat. His mercenary allies, seeing their benefactor fall, quickly surrendered to Captain Reynard's forces. Dorian himself knelt on the marble floor, weaponless, but defiance still etched in every line of his face. "Kill me then," he challenged. "Complete what your father was too weak to do when he discovered my ambitions." "Death would be mercy," Alaric replied. "You will face justice for treason, for my father's murder, and for the lives lost today." As guards secured the fallen prince, Alaric turned to the gathered witnesses, nobles, servants, and soldiers who had filtered into the throne room to see the outcome of the power struggle. Among them stood Lady Helena, her expression serene, as if witnessing the fulfillment of a long-held prophecy. "Today marks not just the end of a rebellion," Alaric proclaimed, "but the beginning of restoration." He extended his hand to Ilara, who stepped forward to stand beside him. Their energies mingled visibly where their hands joined, gold and silver light intertwining like twin flames. "For generations, this kingdom has been ruled by only half its rightful power," he continued. "The balance was broken, the partnership between Alpha and Omega severed. Today, we reclaim our true heritage." Murmurs spread through the crowd as Alaric led Ilara to the dais where two thrones stood, one occupied by kings for generations, the other left empty since the sundering. Those who plotted against the crown believed strength came only from dominance, Alaric said. They were wrong. True power lies in balance, in the joining of complementary forces. 3 days later, as dawn broke over a kingdom still coming to terms with recent events, royal scribes gathered in the council chamber. Before them lay a new decree, its parchment bearing the dual seals of Alpha and Omega, a wolf and a crescent moon intertwined. "By royal proclamation," read the chief scribe, "all laws restricting the rights and education of Omegas are hereby nullified. Schools shall be established in every province for all genders and designations. The historical archives shall be opened and accurate accounts of our kingdom's founding restored to public knowledge." The proclamation continued, detailing sweeping changes that would reshape the social order that had prevailed for centuries. Some councillors shifted uncomfortably, while others, particularly the younger generation, nodded in approval. In the royal garden, beside the blue roses that had been Queen Isolda's legacy, Alaric and Ilara walked in quiet conversation. "There will be resistance," Alaric acknowledged. "Centuries of tradition don't change overnight." "But they will change," Ilara replied, her pendant warm against her skin. "Already reports come from villages of Omegas, discovering abilities long suppressed." Alaric paused beside a stone bench, his expression thoughtful. "When I brought you here from your village, I spoke from arrogance and entitlement. I need strong sons, you'll provide them." He shook his head at the memory. "I knew nothing then, and now?" Ilara asked, her eyes meeting his directly. Now I understand that what I truly needed wasn't an Omega to bear royal heirs, but a partner to help restore balance. He took her hands in his. The question is whether you can forgive my beginning to find a new one with me. I have conditions, she replied, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. Name them. Equality, true equality, not just in proclamations but in practice. I will not be a figurehead queen, but a ruling partner with equal authority. Agreed, he said without hesitation. And our children, should we have them, will be raised to respect both aspects of their heritage, regardless of whether they present as Alpha or Omega. I would have it no other way. Her expression softened. Then yes, Alaric, I accept what you're truly asking. As they sealed their agreement with a kiss, their energies merged once more, visible now only to each other, a private reminder of the bond that had begun with a command, but would continue as a choice, freely made by both. In the palace archives, Lady Helena carefully restored the ancient texts that told the true history of the kingdom. Among them, one prophecy stood out. When Alpha strength and Omega wisdom rejoin as equals, the realm will enter an age of unprecedented prosperity. 1 year later, cherry blossoms drifted like pink snow across the palace courtyards. Spring had arrived early, as if the land itself celebrated the changes that had swept through the kingdom. In the royal nursery, craftsmen put finishing touches on an ancient cradle. Restored from the original royal collection, its wooden frame bore intricate carvings of intertwined wolves and crescent moons, symbols of the renewed balance between Alpha and Omega energies. Lady Helena supervised the preparations, her experienced eyes missing nothing. The royal physicians are standing by, she informed Captain Reynard, who now served as head of the royal guard, though I suspect they'll have little to do. Her Majesty's powers have grown remarkably this past year. In the adjacent chamber, Ilara breathed deeply through another contraction, her hands glowing faintly with silvery light as she instinctively channeled her energy to ease the birth process. Beside her, Alaric remained steadfast, their fingers intertwined, his strength flowing into her as hers flowed into him, the bond between them having deepened with each passing month. Not long now, murmured the midwife, an Omega from Ilara's village, who had been among the first to benefit from the new educational initiatives. I can see the first one's head. Alaric's grip tightened slightly. First one? The midwife smiled. Twins, Your Majesty. Did Her Majesty not tell you? Ilara managed to laugh despite her exhaustion. I wanted it to be a surprise. Hours later, as evening painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, word spread throughout the kingdom. Bells rang from village towers to mountain settlements, announcing the birth of not one royal heir, but two, a son and a daughter. Healthy and strong, in the royal bedchamber, Alaric sat beside Ilara as she cradled their newborns. The boy, slightly larger with a tuft of dark hair like his father's, slept peacefully. The girl, smaller but with an alert gaze, watched the world with eyes that already held hints of her mother's wisdom. Alexander, Alaric said softly, touching his son's tiny hand. And Isolde, he added, gazing at his daughter with wonder. Perfect names, Ilara agreed. One honoring the first Alpha King, one honoring your mother. Lady Helena entered with quiet reverence, carrying a small wooden box inlaid with silver. It is time for the blessing, she announced, as tradition dictates. From the box, she removed a ceremonial dagger, the same one Alaric had shown Ilara in the armory so long ago, his mother's treasured possession. With practiced movements, she pricked first Alexander's heel, then Isolde's, collecting a single drop of blood from each onto a piece of parchment, inscribed with ancient symbols. The drops fell side by side, then merged into one, neither red nor silver, but a shimmering gold that spread across the parchment in patterns resembling a map of the kingdom. The bloodline is confirmed, Lady Helena declared, her voice thick with emotion. Both children carry the dual heritage. The Alpha son will have Omega wisdom. The Omega daughter will have Alpha strength. Alaric and Ilara exchanged glances of profound understanding. This was what the ancient prophecies had foretold, not merely the restoration of balance between rulers, but the beginning of a new bloodline that unified both aspects within each individual. In the great hall below, nobles and commoners alike gathered for the formal announcement. The social barriers that had once divided them had begun to erode under the new laws. Though change came more quickly in some quarters than others, Alaric's cousin Dorian, sentenced to life imprisonment rather than execution, was said to have become a scholar in his confinement, documenting the kingdom's true history as penance for his attempt to suppress it. As twilight deepened into night, Alaric stood on the balcony overlooking the capital city. Lights twinkled below like earthbound stars, each representing lives being lived in a kingdom, slowly healing from centuries of imbalance. Ilara joined him, having left the twins in Lady Helena's capable care for a brief respite. "What are you thinking?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "About legacies," he replied. "When I demanded you provide me with strong sons, I had such a limited understanding of strength. And now?" He turned to face her, the crown he wore for official function set aside, his expression open and unguarded. "Now I understand that true legacy isn't about producing heirs to continue one's bloodline. It's about creating something better for those who follow, a world more balanced and just than the one we inherited." Ilara smiled, leaning against him as they gazed out at their kingdom. "That's a legacy worth building." In the nursery behind them, the royal cradle held the physical embodiment of that legacy, twins born of Alpha and Omega, each carrying both lineages within them. Their tiny hands occasionally reached for each other, even in sleep, an instinctive seeking of balance that mirrored the kingdom's own journey. The ancient throne room below had been restored to its original design, with two equal seats of power occupying the dais. The obsidian throne that had symbolized alpha dominance for generations had been replaced with crystal, allowing light to pass through rather than be absorbed, transparency replacing opacity, partnership replacing subjugation, as Alaric had once declared to a frightened village girl, "I need strong sons." What the kingdom had needed instead was balance restored, and with it, the promise of a future where strength